Well, it's Professor Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department of the Fashion Institute of Technology, doing a tutorial for JD239, a design capstone class. Point of the tutorial is to do a 2D drawing from a detailed ring maquette. So, I'm going to bring in, open a fresh canvas, and bring in my reference and my template. Here is the here's the line work out of Rhino via Illustrator. Cut and paste that here. And then I would also like to bring in the original image for this, which is here. Okay. I'm going to prep this template file by selecting out the part I want to keep. Control I to invert the selection. You can see that selects the remainder of the canvas, and hit Control X to cut. That gets rid of the border. And I'm going to rotate this 11 degrees, commit transform, counter rotate, minus 11 degrees, commit transform. And I don't like working in black, so I will take a moment and lighten my drawing by making it transparent. Slightly transparent. About 80%. I'm going to name it template. And I'm going to lock it. The reference image, I'll bring it over into here. I'll gel it so it doesn't get in my way. Name it, lock it. Give myself a fresh layer to draw on and begin work. 200% is usually a good zoom scale to begin with. In this drawing, I'm going to start with the mechanical drawing. So I'm actually going to want to bring that reference over to where I can see it easily at 200% zoom. Go back to my drawing layer. Actually, the most important view to draw here, from a technical drawing perspective, is going to be this front view. I don't want to now I could set up mirror drawing, but since this is asymmetrical, there's really not a point in doing that. I am going to want to have this have a sculptural cross section here, a rounded section, and I don't want this line to come outward. I want it to come inward. And actually, since these are going to be the same on both sides, I'm going to use that symmetrical drawing tool. I just have to be careful what I choose to draw with it, because it's an asymmetrical ring design, so if I keep it active at the wrong moment, it could cause problems for me. But I want these both rounded the same. And I want it to taper inward towards the center of the ring bore. A little bit. And just because it would be nicer to do so, I'm going to round that corner. But that's actually going to be only on one side. So at this point, I'll turn off the symmetrical drawing. Now notice you're not going to see me changing these colors by reaching over there, because at the very least I'd use a keyboard shortcut, and here at home my stylus is set to do that for me. Okay? So I've clarified that in the front view. What I'm seeing here is this notch as it comes around. Okay? I have to decide what I want that to be. This is where understanding the principles of technical drawing comes in very handy, even though we're going to be depending heavily on maquette. See, if I'm curious what that line is, I can pull a construction line in Painter and I can see what it is. It's this corner where I cut straight down. Okay? But in the design, it doesn't actually do that. In the design, this swirls around and keeps on going. Okay? So that's an important thing to be aware of. So in my design, I'm seeing something that looks more like this, and actually continues. That paper texture is too heavy. Actually continues down and around. Okay? And it would be useful for me to see where that actual turn begins. It begins here, which I pretty accurately caught just by eye. And that's a fairly crisp line. I really don't see that rounding, so I won't break that line to show a rounded edge. I want it to stay crisp. Okay. Having done that, now over here I need to reflect the same kinds of information. I will be moving around from view to view, trying to understand my technical drawing. Unlike the basket ring, there's another tutorial up for a basket ring where I focused a lot on the three-quarter view before going into the detail work. This is a sculptural ring. Okay, so I need to understand it sculpturally before I do anything else. So I have that rounded off where it comes in and around. Alright? If I need to, it would not be a bad idea to do a break line so that I can carry information across. Just like we would in regular mechanical drafting. If I wanted to do that, I would pick a color, do a straight line on a fresh layer, hold down Shift key, and hit enter. Okay? And I should be able to move that without any problem. I'm going to want to rotate that 45 degrees. Actually, minus 45 degrees. I want it to go the other way. Commit transform. And then the placement of that miter line, I'll put a guide in the middle of the stone from the top, and in the middle of the stone from the side. And where these two intersect is where that miter line goes. Okay? That will help me if I have any question about what it is that I'm seeing, breaking information around. Right now I'm okay. I'm pretty clear on what's happening. What I'm seeing here is this width. Okay? If you're curious to how I came about that, I mean, I can visualize it, but you can double check it using that miter line. See? It's right there. Okay? That's going to be rounded. Don't want to keep drawing in blue. And I did have this rounded on the bottom, so I'm going to round it here. Now, the fact that this slopes in from the front does not mean it slopes in from the side. It can slope in here and remain straight up and down here, which is how I prefer it. But I am going to break the edge here to indicate that there's a little bit of roundness. There really wouldn't be much, because that's actually right here. And by then it's going to be, I mean, I'm implying a little bit of a comfort fit on the band right there. But I do want to feel it rounding more as it comes up here. So I'll move the line a little bit farther away from the edge and let there be a roundness to it. Okay? Now, the big question here in this piece is what is happening in here. Okay? What I've drawn in here in the original design is very unclear. Okay? It's very problematic. And I need to explain that better than I have. So, from the side view, actually what I want is I want this to be a ramp that comes down. I don't want to have this basin in here. I want it to come down. And if it's going to come down as a ramp, this is actually going to be bitten into. By this as it comes down. And then this will fade into the shank. Okay. This side over here does round. It can't round as much as this side on the other side does because it's a narrower strip of material. This top right here is not very wide, so there's not a lot of room to round it, but I'll round it slightly and break that edge so that it's clear that it is a rounded edge. Coming up and around. Okay, that leaves some questions to be answered, but it's okay. It's all right. I'm going to go ahead and clear out some of these guides. I need to round the bottom of the shank. To do that evenly, I can just do it by eye, but since I have this wonderful tool, I'm going to go ahead and use it. Make sure you have the plus sign active and not the spinning, because the rotational symbol, if you do that, you're going to actually rotate that off of 90 degrees, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure you have that plus sign. That means you're going to move it. Okay, I'm going to turn off symmetrical drawing now. Don't need it anymore. This coming down and ending suddenly would not be accurate. When this implies that it fades into the shank, it actually implies that it becomes smooth with the shank. Like so. And it is a crisp edge on that basin. I think it may come down a little bit lower than that if I follow this line. It may actually start out a little bit lower and then slowly ascend until it meets flush. With the shoulder. It's important that I get this line quality nice. Alright, so that shows that scalloped or scooped out portion coming into here. Now I'm starting to question what I did over here, because it shows here that this is actually kind of clear of that rim, and what this represents is right here. Okay, it's important to understand this. So I'm going to take a minute. Alright, this edge represents the farthest distance to the side. It's right here, okay? Which over on this side is going to represent the center line. Okay, those are all the same thing. If this is already clear of the top of this shoulder, then the fact that I bit this in does not make sense, because it would actually be riding above this. Okay? So I made a mistake in my drawing. I'll go ahead and clear these off. Fortunately, since I'm working on layers, all I have to do to repair that is to come back in here and Control X, cut. And that will bring back my original drawing. Interesting thing is that in the maquette that actually does touch, because it continues to stay level. So it actually does break in here. So I'm going to compromise. I'm going to let this bite in just slightly. and trust that that would be similar to what would be going on in the real piece. So I've resolved my front, I've resolved my side, now I have to resolve my top. And that's actually the most challenging thing to resolve here. I'm going to put in some guidelines for the opening of my shank, my ring bore. This is important because the illusion that you get here is that this is the actual thickness of the shank, and it isn't. It is not the thickness of the shank. Okay, this is the thickness of this cut that we made when I cut that maquette straight down. That doesn't actually exist in this design. Okay, in this design, there's a ramp that drops down here and fades out as it hits the shoulder. And this has a rounded corner. I could use the Symmetry Tool here, but I'm going to just work freehand. It's going to be faster and accurate enough. If you look, you'll see a thickness here, and this is the actual edge of the shank, okay, as it comes and goes over that edge. Going to break that edge just a little bit, and that actually looks very much like what we have here. Okay, so also, since I cut this downward, this thickness of material disappears. You would no longer see it because it's tucked under. Okay? I am going to bring this around and in. And I want to indicate that it starts to become part of the ramp, and to do that I'm going to actually break that line a little bit so you start to sense that it's fading in. Notice how in the maquette I can actually see the shank through the hole, which is something that I had missed in my sketch. Alright, so I have drawn this pretty much developed as much as it needs to be. In theory, this would be a little bit thinner possibly as it rounds off, but that's pretty much good to go. Alright, the thing is that I've drawn it once. So the question is, why would I want to draw it again? This would not be here. That's part of that step from cutting straight down. And this is a ramp now, not a step. So remove all traces of that step. I don't want to draw it again, obviously, if I don't have to, because that's careful line work. That took some time. I'm going to put a dot right in the middle. That prong. I'm going to drag a selection window to the center of my piece. I'm going to make sure that the proper layer is selected. I'm going to Control C, Control V, and I'm going to rotate that new layer 180 degrees. Commit transform. I'm then going to move it. And I'm going to place that dot in this bottom prong. And if I place it properly, I should not have to do hardly any work on this side. I will group and collapse these two layers. And then I will come in and remove the dot from the prong, because that was just a registration mark. And that's the top view. Okay, now I did not draw my prongs in the front or the side. I'll go ahead and do that. Delete my guides. Turn back on mirror drawing. Looking for the plus sign. Dragging it over. Lining it up. Back to brushstroke. And I've got to be careful, because you can see on the right hand side there, it actually runs into this. So I'm going to stop there and turn off mirror drawing. To complete drawing these prongs. Boating them gently so they curve inward. In my other design that I did on a tutorial, I actually took all the facets off of the technical drawing. That is typically done because these views get very complicated with all of those facets showing. I can bring back the mirror drawing for this. Drop the grain a little bit. It is a little faster to do this in Rhino, but particularly with the Symmetrical Drawing tool in Painter, it doesn't take a long time to do here. Since we have a slope here, I will clean the short side and leave the deep side alone. I might want to clean up or reestablish that top line. And turn off mirror drawing so I can clean up right down to the edge here. So when you're working between software class, you always want to be thinking about where each step of the work would be easiest to do. Is it easier to build these prongs in the maquette or to draw them? It's easier to draw them. Was it easier to clean the stone here or in Rhino? Probably easier in Rhino. I just realized I didn't need to move this right away. I could have left it where it was, because I still need to finish the prongs and to remove some faceting over here. And it's really not going to work much for the prongs, because once again we have two different elevations for those prongs depending on which side we're on. I still have prong to draw here, but it is going to be very useful for cleaning up the facets. Which will make a much simpler and more elegant drawing. Turn off the mirror. And I think that's sufficient. Now the prong over here I do need to draw. It will come down and bite into this ramp. Where it's going to bite in is hard for me to guess without having the 3D model. But I'm going to guess it somewhere in here. I might be wrong, but no one's going to call me on it at this point in the design process. No one's going to call me and say, hey, that looks like it's a 1/10 of a millimeter from being the right elevation as it bites into the shank of the ring. Remember, I'm at 400% when this is printed out. This line work will be incredibly precise. So there is my technical drawing. Okay, going to take my reference, move it over for my 3/4 view. I really don't need the 45-degree angle anymore. So delete it. And now I'm going to come in here and draw this up to match the information in my views. First thing is that you can see where this steps down. I'm going to make that be a gradual descent. Going to continue this around, but it's going to actually fade into the ramp. And this is actually rounded. So I'm going to capture that effect. This step is gone. On both sides. I want to keep this edge crisp, but I want this edge substantially rounded. And this straight flat is starting to curl under towards the center of the ring. I'll just make that a pretty curve. And I'll keep that sculptural quality going. The fact that this slopes straight out to this is actually okay the way it's drawn, because this difference in elevation right here would actually be there until this blended in up in this area. So I think that actually looks authentic. I'm going to leave it. And that's a key phrase, looks authentic. Remember, this is all an illusion, guys. There is no finished 3D CAD model to prove or disprove what I'm doing here. I want this edge rounded, which means I'm going to lose some of the thickness here. This whole edge of the shank should stop feeling flat and start feeling rounded off. This rounding will decrease the thickness of the shank under the finger. Now, theoretically it would change it quite a bit under here too. But if I let it go too thin under here, I think it will feel poor. So I'm going to cheat and let the rhino drawing hold sway here, even though in reality it would not. Over here I need to show this softening. It can't be as rounded as the full area, but it still is definitely rounded. And it becomes more rounded as it heads over into here. This is where the shank comes up. We know that it actually ends up being equal to the shoulder here. We know there is no step. So I'm going to draw the line first. So I can know where it is. And then I'm going to lose it as it fades in. What's happening here? This is where the base of that root of that channel was at. That doesn't exist anymore. So I'm going to let this just be soft. Come around. The fact that this is rounded off is going to thin this a little bit. Normally I wouldn't bother with it, but because this is in the far side of the ring, it being full thickness with foreshortening and what have you makes it look really beefy. So I'm going to go ahead and use what I know would happen and let it become a little thinner. Let it come under here. I've rounded off the bottom of this in the front view, so I'll just let this keep coming around in a swirl, which I think accurately captures what the designer had in mind. Okay, this does not end in a point here. We know that it continues to swirl around, but it also fades in. And I like letting it fade right there. I don't want it to look too hard going through that area. And that is pretty much the ring. I have a couple of rhino dots that remained. I'll remove those. Clean that up a little bit nicer. But this is all quality of drawing now. This isn't accuracy of drawing. This is how nice is the line work. Which is important because the illusion I want to give is that there's a full-blown rhino model behind this. My prongs. Like so. This is the prong I would see the most of. I guesstimated it came down a little ways before biting in. In a 3/4 view, that would be about yay so much. Be just a hint of thickness here. That would be good. Now I think that since this tucks in, that I would actually get more of a roll here, or more of a roll under, but I think it looks pretty the way it is, and no one's going to know that but me. So I'm going to let it stand. So that would be, yeah, that prong looks a little weird. Looks like it's tucking under the stone too far. I hate to make it look straight, but from this perspective it would look fairly straight. And I do want it to cut off that mystery there. Okay, that is a completed drawing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my reference now. Say I want this to be part of the finished drawing. Put my reference up here, go to Effects, Tonal Control, Correct Colors. I'm going to grab the blue slider and I'm going to move it all the way to the edge. Okay? And then I'm going to go to tonal control, adjust colors. I'm going to change the hue shift so it's a little more greenish. I'm going to drop the saturation so it's not so bright. I'm going to raise the value so it becomes kind of an architectural pencil, kind of a pale blue, and hit OK. And that will allow me to show that it's in the drawing, that it's the original reference, but that it is not the same as the other line work. Okay? So, that is a completed drawing. Sketch, top, technical top, front and side, 3/4 view actual size. Now notice in this case that in the other video I actually brought the size of the piece down a little bit, because since we placed the 10mm reference circle in the center, the ring shank is accurate, but the stone and the head gets enlarged a little bit. I think that looks pretty in this case. It's not very much of an enlargement, and there's no real detail up in here for me to fuss with reducing the size of this. So I'll leave it as it is. And that's it. Thanks for watching.